Um, I am going to pass it off to Dave to talk about Phoenix shade work and heat work. And you missed it earlier, Dave. I know you had to join late, but we went around and asked everyone what their favorite thing to do is to stay cool. Some people just have to stay inside. Some people escape Phoenix and head up north. All kinds of great ideas. Gotta, go to the pool. But yeah, we're looking forward to your presentation and so thankful that you could be here to join us on relatively short notice. And yeah, we'll give it to you next about 20-25 minutes on the agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Kenneth. Good to see everyone. Thanks so much to for the time, chance to be here, and Kenneth, nice to see you and some familiar names and friends, and some I don't know. So looking forward to the conversation. Dave Hondula from the City of Phoenix Office of Heat Response and Mitigation. We're part of the City Manager's Office here at the city, and also a professor in ASU's Geography program. And I guess the theme of what I'm going to chat about, Kenneth, is a little bit hopeful that those responses that you heard to the question at the beginning are not always number one for every resident of Phoenix. The idea that we have to be inside or we have to go elsewhere, thinking about what we can do as a city that creates more spaces that are comfortable year round in the city of Phoenix and certainly beyond, and appreciate the role that you all play in helping drive those ideas forward. I have a few slides to share. And I know some of you have seen versions of this presentation before, so thank you for hanging in there. I'll try to go quickly through the slides in the hopes that we can have some dialogue. Before I put the slides on the screen, I'll briefly share that it's our interpretation that the heat office has a pretty broad charge for improving citywide efforts related to heat with and through all departments. That includes a lot of summer specific work, like our partnership and involvement in the city's 24/7 heat respite location and other cooling centers, water bottle and heat relief supply distribution. We certainly have a lot of work that is really front and center at this time of the year, thinking about keeping people safe and alive during the summer. We call that portion of our work the heat response program. And then we're broadly engaged on longer term strategies for cooling the city, making it more comfortable. That'll include the tree and shade work that we'll talk about now. It'll include tree and shade work that we may not talk about right now, but also built environment design, surface materials, et cetera. We are asked to engage on those topics as well. I found, so I'm about 3.5 years in the position now, and I found the search for the boundaries of the heat work to be one of the most challenging parts of the job, probably like the way that many of you think about health and livability. Certainly seems like heat is an infinitely intersectional topic. So I don't know yet where the work of the heat office ends, but I know what we're working on right now, and I'm happy to share a little bit of that with you all today. All right, let's see if we can get the mechanics to work here. Yes. Okay, so pleased to talk about the Shade Phoenix Plan. This is the what might be known as a tree and shade master plan, or have related names in other jurisdictions. But our document is called the Shade Phoenix Plan, and we'll talk a little bit about that choice in a few moments. To give the high-level takeaways, especially if you need to jet. Oh, and sorry, we somehow started at the end. Let's start at the beginning. In case anyone needs to take off, this is the city's governing policy document related to tree and shade programs as of November 2024. So we're about 6 months into the first year of the Shade Phoenix Plan era. It was unanimously adopted by our city council. And I would argue that this is a public health plan as much as it is anything else focused on tree and shade efforts. I think, I'm not going to say uniquely uh, uh, compared to other plans around the city, but or other plans around the country related to trees and shade. But I think our plan elevates the focus on people and health in a different way than some other tree and shade plans out there. This is not first and foremost an ecological plan. It's not first and foremost a beautification plan. It's not a food plan. And we recognize that those topics are important and intersect with tree and shade efforts, but we've really tried to center people. And what is unique and distinctive within the City of Phoenix context is that this is a plan that is resourced. There is approximately $60 million of committed funding to tree and shade efforts that's reflected in this plan. And that is a major contrast from where we were in 2010, the last time the city had a comprehensive tree and shade plan called the Tree and Shade Master Plan, which was a good document for its time by any means, but also landed at a really tough time in municipal government history, in that all cities were grappling with the effects of the Great Recession. So the previous plan had approximately $0 committed to it, and we're really fortunate to be in a position now where our city council, our voters, staff, and other partners have made significant investments, and this plan really describes how we're going to guide and implement those investments as we move forward over the next 5 years. We won't spend time elaborating on all of the values of the plan, and we invite everyone to check out the plan and provide feedback. We're working on our first annual report for the plan, and it'll certainly include updates on the actions. But if we need to have our thinking challenged on some of the core values or other components of the plan, we'd gladly welcome that. I'll draw your attention to the first two and the last one on the slide here, just to give some examples of the core values that we really hope are reflective of what we heard from the community and some of you as partners in the planning process. This idea that people are the priority. We want to put shade where people are. Our goal is not necessarily to plant as many trees as possible in the locations where it's the cheapest and easiest to plant. In fact, I feel like our mission in some ways is the opposite. We want to put shade in the places that are the most expensive and hardest to plant, because that's where the people are. And we are hopeful, and we invite and would welcome your company on this, on looking at core value number 2. Can we start talking about shade similarly to how we talk about water, electricity, transportation as a critical resource that the community depends on? And shade, of course, is a little different than those, because it's I don't even know if it's fair to say it's invisible, but shade, it's kind of the absence of sunlight. So you can't touch it and feel it the same way you can a water pipe. But we'd like to talk about it as a critical resource, or maybe even a critical infrastructure. And then the 6th core value, again, our city council unanimously adopted this plan. Recognition that the path that has got us from past to present is probably not going to be the same path that takes us from present to whatever the community's vision is. So we do see a need for disruption in our tree and shade work, sensitive and sensible disruption, but we are going to use and lean on the language here that we need to take some risks and try some new things to move forward. We were really fortunate to have a lot of input on the plan, many different forums for community engagement. I'd always argue we could have done more on this front, but I think we had a decent core of engagement. Certainly leaning on the expertise of many city departments that are involved, community workshops, an online survey, and input from regional and national thought leaders, some of you on the call, and partners like American Forests. And I'll briefly highlight that I felt like we had a little bit of a balancing act to do with community engagement. Some of the feedback that we hear in working on tree and shade efforts is, geez, we've provided so much input over the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. You have infinite number of survey responses. We've gone to so many workshops. We've provided comments at city council meetings. We've posted on social media time and time again. Just get to work, city. And yet at the same time, we don't feel like we can be disconnected from the contemporary voice in the community. So hopefully we did a decent job trying to strike that balance. And we continue to learn and listen through our neighboring plans at the city, including the climate action plan process that we know some of you are leading right now. The village planning committees were a really important part of our community engagement, gave us a chance to have full geographic coverage of the city. I don't know that anyone would see the top concerns from our village planning committee colleagues as surprising necessarily, but I certainly view their voice as among those most authoritative. Let's do more. Let's do a better job with maintenance and replacement, and let's try to move away from one-time funding opportunities, which unfortunately do represent the vast majority of those $60 million right now. Also, some of you might know the heat office is a little overloaded or overweighted on folks with an academic or research background, and as such, the plan really takes advantage of some state-of-the-art data resources in the tree and shade world. Uh, we work with Google's Environmental Insights Explorer data as the best representation of tree canopy coverage throughout the city, and also a new total shade coverage product that ASU and UCLA helped work on. And you can see some of the example figures here, including the map of tree canopy. And I'll remind those who may not have heard it recently, or maybe it's a new content for some of you, the huge disparity that we see in tree canopy throughout the city is a priority for the Shade Plan and is a priority for the mayor. In fact, our mayor was the first to take what was called the Tree Equity Pledge from the national nonprofit American Forest a number of years ago. As you look at the map, if you have great eyes, you can see the difference in the legend there. More than a tenfold difference between some neighborhoods that have the most and fewest trees. So we'd really like to think about how do we bring up those neighborhoods that have the lowest tree and shade coverage while being mindful of the metrics. I appreciated the conversation about metrics that was happening when I joined the call. We want to be sure, for example, that the tree coverage in a neighborhood in South Phoenix is appropriately represented and thought about in our planning process if that neighborhood happens to have a number of tree nurseries in it. Those tree nurseries would make it look like that neighborhood has a lot of tree and shade coverage, but those trees are largely inaccessible to most residents there. So sure, they do provide some cooling benefit and so on, but we're really trying to be precise and specific and nuanced in how we're interpreting the data. And that's a shift from the 2010 plan, at least in the way the words are written on paper. One of the ways we're thinking about that is having site-specific goals. These are recommendations in the plan. And Kenneth, this idea actually comes out of work we had the chance to do together in the MAG Active Transportation Plan process, which maybe 7 or 8 years ago now, maybe more. One of the topics that our friends at the Nature Conservancy were thinking about at the time was how much shade do we need to have a safe walk in the summer? If we're thinking about a 20-minute walk, what is the appropriate amount of shade coverage? We had the chance to work with Nature Conservancy to develop good, better, best recommendations, and we've expanded beyond that idea in the shade plan. I wouldn't necessarily treat these numbers as authoritative or set in stone. I would think about the framework here meant to inspire future thinking and planning and site design. Let's think about how a site is used and have an appropriate shade target for it. So if we're thinking about playground equipment, bus stops, places where there's a lot of contact with surfaces or people congregating, of course, we want to aim for very high shade coverage there. Maybe there are some places where we can tolerate lower shade coverage as well. I don't know. Yes, it would be fantastic to have 100% shade coverage over the entirety of a parking lot. Is that our priority right now relative to some of these other opportunities? We could debate. And we're trying to apply this framework right now to all of the public properties at the city of Phoenix, and even breaking those properties up into individual areas. If you think about a park, for example, we could probably make a reasonable argument that there are some areas of a park that are much higher priorities for high shade coverage than others. So what does it look like if we assemble the puzzle pieces and come up with a really nuanced shade target for an individual park or another municipal property? That's work that we're pursuing right now, trying to move away from this idea of the broad 25% goal that was written in the 2010 plan. Instead, we want to be more ambitious in some locations, maybe less ambitious in others, with the idea that we want to get the shade where the people are. We won't spend a ton of time talking about the actual meat of the plan, the actions, but I'll summarize them briefly and give a few examples. 36 actions in the plan that are broken into these 4 big buckets. Bucket 1 expand shade, do more on both public and private property. Really important that we think about private property in the context of trees and shade. Uh, we can make an argument that at least 95%, maybe 99% of the tree canopy coverage in the city of Phoenix is on private property. So if we're only, if we exclude the mountain preserves, which are kind of a unique case. So if we're only focused on municipal property, we're going to have a really hard time moving the needle on overall tree and shade coverage. So do more, expand shade, maintain what we have. This is probably the hardest part of the whole portfolio, and I think we'll have some time to discuss that in Q&A. Let's mainstream, let's evaluate what we're doing, institutionalize programs, and certainly community engagement, education, and empowerment. So 36 strategies into those four big buckets. Talked about the high level budget number before. It translates into roughly 27,000 new trees and 550 shade structures over the next 5 years, with a disproportionate investment in low to moderate income communities, reflecting the mayor's tree equity pledge. We'll just very briefly give a few examples of actions. Our Parks Department is a really huge part of the shade plan. A lot of tree planting that happens in city parks. And if you dive into the details in the shade plan, they've actually proposed what I think is a really important shift in their metrics for how they're going to evaluate their progress. They're looking at a metric that's more about net tree gain, not total trees planted, but parks is often replacing a lot of trees. They lose a lot of trees. So they've shifted their metrics to focus on net gains, and you'll see the details in the plan. The city maintains a unbelievable inventory of trees. Our Parks Department is responsible not just for maintaining trees in city parks, but in fact, a lot of trees on other parts of our public property. They have the specialized equipment. They have the trained staff and expertise for that tree maintenance. They have a big role there as well. And they're also responsible for a lot of the training programs, either for city employees or supporting more regional training. And we know that workforce is such a huge part of where we need to move the needle to do a better job on tree and shade efforts community-wide. The street transportation department is really an important player in this as well. We're going to come back to the first one, this landscape maintenance, in just a moment, but I'll briefly acknowledge that they have some dedicated funding for tree planting. The second bullet point there, we're also working with them on a built shade structure program focusing on intersections and crosswalks, construction starting this year on almost 20 shade structures throughout the city. But I'll have another eye exam here. Let's go back to the first bullet point, this idea of landscape maintenance. Some of you who are in the planning world, know this very well, and this may be a surprise for others. It's certainly an area where we feel like we need help educating the community. If you look very closely at the figure there, the aerial below landscape maintenance citywide, you'll see that there are some little green slivers along the streetscape and in the medians. And those little green slivers, those are what our street transportation department defines as landscape maintenance areas. That is what the area that the city is responsible for maintaining. And where there are landscape maintenance areas through the city, how continuous they are, what shape they take, if they exist at all, is tremendously variable. So if we drop ourselves on a random street in the city of Phoenix and think about the cross section or the long view looking east or west, who's responsible for which portions of the landscape? I'm not going to say it's anybody's guess, but what the actual answer is to that question is not immediately obvious to the naked eye, certainly not obvious to the public at large, and really informs what our strategy would be moving forward. So, so we're thinking about some strategies to certainly improve the look of the city's landscape maintenance areas, but also help understand the really complex ownership dynamics of the really important shade resource of the streetscape. And just a few more here, our transit department doing some great work here. They tell us that every bus stop in the city that can feasibly have a shade structure because of engineering constraints and so on is going to have one. By the time we get to 2030, that's more than 3,000 bus stops with shade structures. Can there always be more shade? Absolutely, but I think it's a tremendous achievement that they have there. You might have seen the news or been out at some of the unveiling projects for this this Experiments in Shade initiative with our Office of Arts and Culture called Sombra. They're at public parks this summer. Some really creative designs, some that are really focused on the shade component of shade, and others are more focused on the art component and the sort of experiential component of shade. Some interesting ideas out there. And then our office has had the chance to lead some tree and shade grant programs, continuing with Inflation Reduction Act funding, which as of yet is safe. And very soon, coming to the market will be an RFP for a community organization to help us administer a tree steward program with Inflation Reduction Act funds. We imagine there'll be approximately 10 hired and trained community members who will be tree stewards, real tree leaders in the community. And we're looking for an organization to partner with us to manage and administer that program. Stay tuned. We think it'll be coming out in the next week or two. I've highlighted some of the strengths of the plan as we've been going along. But just to come back to the title of the plan itself, um, we think there is room to elevate the perceived importance of shade, the value of shade, shade as a commodity resource infrastructure. I'm not sure what the right word is. Uh, and while we have a preference for shade from natural sources, we think all shade is good shade. So we were very intentional in calling this the Shade PHX Plan because we think that's what we heard from the community. The goal is more shade. Shade is so important on impacting the body heat load in the summer. So we'll see if the name sticks and takes as we move forward. And I'll briefly come back to this idea that we're not just thinking about shade in the climate action plan, in the city's heat response plan. There are other heat-related strategies, including our work to experiment with reflective surfaces. This particular picture is from the roof of the city's safe outdoor space, where we've got a donation from 3M on some supercooling film that we're measuring the impact of right now. And with that, Kenneth, I'll say thanks. Hopefully that wasn't too much time, and looking forward to a couple questions now, and maybe we can have more over email or down the road. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. It was tremendous. Super comprehensive approach to the work that y'all are doing in Phoenix, and a lot of thoughtfulness into how to make this equitable. I think every city needs a Dave Hondula. um,
That's a
so,
tough wish for them, but thank you for the compliment.
yeah, questions at this time. I see Austin has one.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dave. Really appreciate the information. So I work for First Things First, Arizona's early childhood agency, and we fund a lot of family resource centers. We work with a lot of childcare providers throughout the state, throughout Phoenix specifically. Is there a way, or is there a best resource for them to access shade? I don't know, materials or funds to put shade infrastructure up in those locations because a lot of them are community hubs. Just think there's a lot of ways we can collaborate there.
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. And I'm sorry, Kenneth, for the shameless plug. But my wife, Jenny, is a professor at ASU who works in the heat and physiology space and is really interested in children's health as related to heat. Children have some unique vulnerabilities and sensitivities in this space, including this one of her talking points. That's my favorite. They are closer to the ground, so we need to be especially mindful of hot surfaces out there, and often on the ground. Sometimes on all fours. Yeah, good question. Thanks for it. In the city of Phoenix, in particular, with Inflation Reduction Act funding, we have opportunities for tree planting at schools and other youth-focused centers, and we're trying to be as broad as possible in defining that universe of youth-focused centers. So we'd love to be in touch about how to do that. You can email me or we'll get in touch with some of our other team members. And beyond that, at the state level, I don't have a great inventory in my mind of what the resources are. I know there was a piece of legislation last year that provided some funding for tree planting at schools, kind of a six-figure amount. Some might know more there. I hear rumors of interests from so skincare groups, skin cancer groups, and so on. But I don't know what the funding streams are right there. I know what we've got the opportunity for in Phoenix, but let's continue the conversation if we can, Austin, to see how we can put our heads together and help make resources available. And I'll certainly talk to our friends at the state health department who have a role in the Sunwise program and some other initiatives.
All right, thank you. That sounds great. Really appreciate it.
Austin, David Dubé, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Kenneth. Great presentation, Dr. Hondula. You'd mentioned that, I think you'd mentioned Parks and Rec maintains an inventory. There used to be an online kind of interactive inventory of trees in the public space throughout Phoenix, and I haven't seen that in a while. Is that still available, or have I just missed it?
Oh, very timely question there. The city uh, well, not just, but a few months ago, authorized a contract to update the city's tree inventory. Unfortunately, and I'm saying this not to disparage other departments and not to say that having a dedicated heat office is the only model by which these cross-department efforts can succeed. But because the tree inventory requires engagement from its 12 different departments of the city that manage land that have trees on them, if nobody's hand is on the wheel of managing the inventory, it's easy for the inventory to become out of date. And unfortunately, that's what happened in Phoenix. So I'd be happy to email you the file right now. We still have the background file, but I'm not sure that there is a tree inspected and the inspection recorded in the inventory over the last 4 or 5 years. So it's not really up to date. So I know our colleagues across departments are really excited to have the new inventory complete. We actually are due to talk to Parks about an update there. And it's certainly the intention that the inventory will be publicly viewable. And we're also thinking about an even broader tool that allows for engagement with other types of tree planting projects that may not be city property specific. So if in your neighborhood you had a tree planting project and you wanted to showcase it on our inventory for whatever means, we'd love to have that functionality as well.
Stan, thank you. I always found that inventory to be at least really interesting, if not also very useful. So thank you.
Question from Ryan, and then Dave, just want to draw attention to Amy's question about the RFP on the tree steward program.
I'll try to be quick about my questions. I've had the pleasure of working with David's group to try to help deliver some shade. But I noticed in that work, this idea of just get to work message from the public. There's still trade-offs that you have to navigate in order to deal with the highly sensitive impacts or concerns from the immediate community who are afraid of the draw of shade to the public realm. How have you, I guess, been able to navigate that with this plan update?
I don't know that we've navigated it perfectly, Ryan. Thanks for the question. And just give an example. Of course, as you allude to, there are a lot of opinions and concerns about shade in public space and who might be using that shade and so forth. I think it's the heat office's general philosophy that we don't want to not have shade because out of concern of who might use it. But we recognize there are concerns and conflicting issues that we need to think about. An interesting learning experience for us, and this is not truly public engagement, but the idea of staying engaged with all relevant components as we're moving forward on our intersection and crosswalk shade structure program. We were going through we were checking all of the boxes on the street transportation process for implementing a project in public space. But since the last time their process had been revised, we now have some new technology from our police department, cameras, if you will, at intersections. And we didn't catch until very late in the process that the structures may physically obscure the view of these cameras at intersections. I was like, there's a missed opportunity for earlier engagement. We could have avoided a little bit of pain there. But I mean, this is a work in progress. I'd say every week we have a conversation with our friends in homeless solutions, friends in transit, and so on. I unfortunately don't have a brilliant answer here, but I think the city benefits from having some voices advocating for shade for all of the time, while navigating other concerns. Sorry for not a super clear answer.
I've seen you answer these questions in live, and I think that you plot a very strategic course between kindness and politeness. There's the kindness of their sort of concerns for the broader community or the community people who feel like they're feeling unsafe by, too much loitering and things of that nature. But being very clear and intentional with that you're providing shade for everybody. And I think that you plot that talking point very strategically and well. So
Well, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that, Ryan. I think, it's the I suspect it's the your guiding philosophy behind, sort of training that you've received or I've received many on this call. Uh, a built environment that supports healthier people overall is going to produce better outcomes, right? If I don't think it's unreasonable to imagine that if more people have access to more shade, there will be fewer agitated and people in the community, right? And we could probably play through 20 other examples of that. Maybe we're working on making that argument, but I think it can be made.
and in order to try to, I guess, keep my questions as quality and as applicable to everybody as possible, this question about maintenance, you bring this up. The resources are very thin in terms of the maintenance crews. Maintenance crews never ask for more responsibility given their limited resources and funding available to them in order to meet their objectives. So adding more maintenance is always a struggle. So trees obviously are a big maintenance item. Physical shade or structural shade, maybe a little less so. So I think that there's some balance there that you're striking. I was wondering too if this plan, if you thought about solar power and that as actually a funding resource, as you're able to generate power for the benefit of streetlights and have some sort of offset of costs on one hand and funding that you're able to provide using solar power.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I'd say we have not thought about it very deeply. Just as and we're really not trying to be respectful of the divisions of city government, which create the problems that we're talking about. But it happens to be that the lead thinking on solar energy comes from our friends in the Office of Sustainability, and we do intersect and overlap with them a lot. In fact, I think we just scheduled another meeting on this very topic as well. So yeah, I think we see it as part of the solution set. I don't think you'll find the term solar panel in the shade plan. That's probably a shortcoming of it. But I do think we need to be creative as you're suggesting and thinking about how to provide the shade and how to pay for it. And I appreciate your recognition that all types of shade require maintenance, and we don't have the right mechanism as a city right now that appropriately escalates maintenance funding as we add more. We need, and so if you've heard of a model somewhere across the country where there's, I don't know what the right vocabulary is, an automatic escalator, sort of companion maintenance funding. Is there a shade trust fund of some kind? We'd love to learn about that and workshop it with our city council and city management.
It isn't just about shade, dude. Like the planners, I think, have a big shortcoming in understanding the tax base versus the tax liabilities that are within our cities. And we're not using our fiscal sustainability compass very well in order to help navigate those decisions. So I think that this is much bigger than shade or anything that you're tackling. So planners really can help step up and be a better leader on that regard.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you again, Dave, for being here and for your presentation. If
Kenneth, I'll
folks,
briefly just hit the questions in the chat if I may. Amy, yes, that's our hope. We need to get one or two more sign-offs from folks, but all the legal administrative mechanism is essentially done. So yeah, please stay tuned. And Kenneth, whatever is appropriate in terms of a distribution mechanism for that opportunity, we'd love to chat about that. And I see a question here about tree canopy data as well. If we could continue that conversation over email, I'd love to dive in, and certainly just to share how we've been thinking about it. And it is very much our hope that there will be a new public tree inventory that we can all engage and play with in the near future. But there are some other options out there for the intermediate term.
wonderful. Well, virtual silent round of applause for
Thank you all. Great to
presentation
see
and the
so many,
conversation.
so many of you. Thanks, Kenneth, for the opportunity to
Of
chat
course,
with this powerhouse group.
of course. In this last minute or two, I'll just have